Okay, I think we're going to start because obviously there is a lot to talk about. And we do have an hour with Mossi. We're so grateful for his time. So I think let's get started and really maximize our time because we want to get to some questions as well, obviously, from those of you who are here today. So I want to just start by saying hello and welcoming everyone, and thank you for joining us today. For those that don't know me, which is probably many of you, my name is Maytal, and I'm the incoming executive director for Partners for Progressive Israel. I did, of course, hope that I would eventually meet you all, but could never imagine that it would be under such difficult and trying circumstances. So I am grateful for all of you joining us today as we unpack this ever-evolving situation on the ground in Israel and Gaza, talk a bit more about not only what is happening today, but where we go from here. For those folks joining, I do see that we have quite a few registrations today. So for those that are joining that are new to Partners for Progressive Israel, just a bit about us. We are an American nonprofit dedicated to the achievement of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors, which includes an end to Israel's occupation. Partners supports Israelis working to ensure social justice, civil rights, Jewish-Arab partnership, and equality for all Israel's inhabitants. The organization wishes to deepen Americans' understanding of Israel's and Palestine's complexities so that they can better advocate for a progressive future for all the inhabitants of the region, which we're obviously going to need to see in the aftermath of what is happening today. And today I am so honored to have with us our friend, a former member of Knesset for the Meretz party, Mossi Raz. Not only has Mossi been involved in politics for many years, he is also a leading voice of the peace and anti-occupation movement, a brave voice on the Israeli left. So with that, we are going to get started. I'm going to bring Mossi onto the screen with me here. And I do just want to let everybody know that the questions, the Q&A is open. Like I said, we will hopefully get to all of your questions. So please feel free. You don't have to wait until the end. Feel free to put your questions in as we go. So first of all, first and foremost, I want to say, Mossi, welcome and thank you so much for being here. And obviously, as someone who's so deep in this work, we want to talk to you and get your insights. But before we do any of that, I want to just check in on you to the extent that you are comfortable or willing to share. How are you doing? How is your family, given everything that's happening right now?
Thank you, Metal, and everybody. Good evening. For you, it's noon, probably for most of you. Maybe morning for some of you. I'm honored to talk to you in these very, very difficult times. As a family, all my family is safe and okay, but of course, in such high numbers, we know people. I know for sure at least two of the people who were kidnapped. Both of them are known peace activists. Both of them used to come and volunteer in taking kids from Gaza to hospitals in Israel. And I'm afraid that I know more than the people because we don't know yet. Who are the people who were kidnapped? How many people were kidnapped? And by the way, there is a difference. I told to my friend who called me earlier that his parents are missing from kibbutz Be'eri. I don't know yet if they are kidnapped, but probably they are. I told him there is a real difference between kidnapping citizens to capture soldiers. It's not the same. In a war, you can capture soldiers, both sides, and in the end of the war, of course, you have to treat them well, and in the end of the war, you release the captures from both sides. Kidnapping civilians is a war crime that is totally different. And actually, we saw in the last weeks, we saw in Saturday the deepest massacre and deepest war crime that we ever knew in the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, even between Israel and the Arab world. There was nothing like that. Yeah, we had in our history as nation in Europe things like that, but not here, not in the Middle East, not in Israel, not in Palestine, not in any Arab state. It never happened, and it's something that has to shock us all. And we all have to check everything we fought in the past. So I know many people, maybe not many, but I know people that, as I said, were kidnapped. I have my friend that his parents probably were kidnapped. Another friend that is still looking for his daughter who was in the party. Unfortunately, we understand that most chances that she was murdered, but maybe kidnapped. And I know a former minister, Yizhar Shai, who lost his son in the battle. He was a soldier killed in the battle. I know member Knesset Naama Lazimi, that a relative of her was killed in the battle, and Meretz activist Rabbi Dana Sharon, that she lost her brother, and so many others. So those are real, and we don't know yet many of the names. So every day we hear bad news about what happened a few days ago, but it's still news.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's obviously such a difficult time, and I appreciate you kind of sharing what it's like, what the realities are like. It's one of those situations where, of course, it's such a small country that it's very hard to imagine that there are folks on the ground who are not in some ways connected to this. And obviously you are as well. I want to take a bit of a turn and talk about what's actually happening on the ground. We obviously cannot talk about what is happening without acknowledging the government that has been in power since December. It was confirmed on Tuesday that Netanyahu actually had intelligence from Egypt that something was coming, and there are a lot of folks calling this a massive military and intelligence failure on the part of the government. How did this happen? There's a lot of speculation about, being distracted because of what's happening with the judicial overhaul and divisiveness within society. Do you think that contributed to the extent that Israel was caught unaware by this attack?
There are many things that we don't know yet. And of course, there are things that are known, but not to me. Netanyahu is not approving this information that he got anything from the Egyptians, but maybe it went to different places, not to Netanyahu himself. Now the army says today in the first time that they knew about an attack, but could not even think and could not knew about how large is this attack. And therefore, of course, there is a difference between, cutting the fence of the border in one place and attacking one kibbutz to cutting the fence in 80 places with thousands of terrorists and attacking 22 kibbutz, a few cities, 2 parties, and 8 military locations. But anyhow, it seems that first, no matter what, the government is responsible, no matter what. Second, we have to be frank enough between ourselves to say that maybe it could happen even under previous governments. Maybe we thought that the technology is enough to stop those terrorists. Maybe we thought that the army is strong enough or the numbers of soldiers are enough to stop these terrorists, because I don't know exact numbers, but it seems that in first time, the terrorists in the area were more than the soldiers. We know that the number of soldiers in the occupied territories are way more than in this border. Maybe this was another mistake. On the other hand, we see people who say maybe it was a mistake to withdraw from Gaza. Maybe it was a mistake to manage the Hamas in the way that the Hamas was managed in the last years. We know that on one hand, government, especially this one, but not only this one, preferred the Hamas on the Palestinian Authority. On the other hand, right-wingers would say we had to defeat the Hamas. I don't know if we could, but they say that. So there are so many thoughts, and but yes, everybody is astonished from the fact that the army was so weak, the intelligence was so bad, and of course the crimes were so. Those atrocities were so deep. We could never think about this, and we have to remember, this is the most important. The criminals were the Hamas terrorists. Maybe we made mistakes. Yes, we did crimes in the past, but no crime is even close to that.
Yeah. So I do want to ask you about that actually, when you talked about Hamas versus the PA. I think that that's something that has been talked about a little bit in terms of the strategy of weakening the PA over Hamas. I'm not sure that all folks understand kind of the thought behind that from the part of politicians. To the extent that you can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, basically, there were people in the right wing in Israel, I think including Netanyahu himself, but since 2002 and the Arab League Peace Initiative and the support of Palestine, official Palestine, which is the Palestinian Authority in this initiative, they thought that they have to show that there is no Palestinian partner. And what is the best way to show that there is no Palestinian partner? To work with this side that is not a partner, that does not support peace with Israel in any situation. So if they don't want peace with us, then we can go on with our occupation in the West Bank. And it's pretty convenient for us. Of course, not all of them would say that in so many words, but even Netanyahu himself said 4 years ago that he preferred the Hamas on the Palestinian Authority. Smotrich has said the same, but more than saying, we saw them acting while they cutted the taxes that they have to transfer to the Palestinian Authority according to the agreements, money that is belong to the Palestinians. They let Qatar bringing money to the Hamas. So it's not only talking; it's even doing. And the fact that while the Palestinian Authority in the last 20 years basically cooperated with Israel regarding security. Yes, not only because of the interest of Israel, of course, their main interest was the interest of the Palestinian Authority, of the regime, of the president, of Palestinian businessmen in the occupied territories. Yes, I know, but they cooperated with Israel while Hamas not. And still, the government let money go to the Hamas while cutting the money from the PLO and the Palestinian Authority.
It's a It's a tough situation for sure. It's very, I think, very complex, and understanding that very complex on the ground. Because it's a very complex situation, I want to turn to something that touches a little bit more on civil society. So we saw, we've now seen what has been a 9-month protest movement mobilize to supporting folks on the ground, collecting names of those lost, collecting supplies. It's incredible resilience in such a difficult time. I'm wondering if you can talk, to the extent that you've seen it or that you've been involved, what does civil society mobilization in this crisis moment look like in Israel?
Actually, it is really amazing. On one hand, we saw those atrocities and crimes that I talked about. And on the other hand, we saw all the infrastructure of the civil society, of the protest movement, but not only the protest movement. Even fans of soccer teams or basketball teams. All those infrastructures of WhatsApp groups. People are recruiting volunteers to help in the south. People are donating money or food or clothes or whatever to the people in the south or to the soldiers. More than 300,000 reservist soldiers were recruited. I must say, most of them, we didn't see that in the last decades. Most of them were happy to be recruited. I think it never happened in the last 50 years. People were happy to be called to the army. I saw my daughter who was called to the army. She was happy. Actually, she volunteered even before she was called to the army, and there's so many people like that. Another thing that I think is very positive, and I must say, I think Hamas failed in one thing. They fought. Israeli citizens are going to fight between themselves, Palestinians against Jews. And up to now, the opposite is happening. First, I have to say that among the victims, there are tens of Bedouin, Arab, Muslim, Palestinian citizens of Israel, who were, some of them were assassinated by the Hamas terrorists. Women was killed by them. Some of them were by the missiles, were killed by the missiles, and there are few Druze who were killed as serving in the army. And we see municipalities, Arab municipalities, offer places to people who left the residence in the south. We see Arab Palestinian citizens who volunteer. So, and we saw very good comments of some of the Palestinian leaders in the Knesset, like Mansour Abbas, Ayman Odeh, former Minister Isawi Frej, and others. So, and this is really a strength. We saw Ben Gvir trying to say this is Shomer Chomot #2, like he wants people to confront, but right now I see the opposite. I hope that it's going to go on like that, because we are going to face more difficult times, in the meaning that now the war is in Gaza, and now the victims are in Gaza. And the Palestinian citizens of Israel are going to see their people from their nation suffering more and more. So it's not going to be easy, but this is a very positive point in this situation.
So I want to actually ask you just a little bit more about that, because I think what's been really striking for a lot of folks in the diaspora, I have seen this myself, there's a lot of divisiveness among different groups in the diaspora. And we're not seeing a lot of solidarity between, you're either pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestine. We're not seeing we're not seeing a coming together in solidarity of understanding that moving forward together has to be a part of shared society. And for however we can take inspiration from what is happening, seeing Israeli civil society able to do this, we see groups like Standing Together, for example, mobilizing Palestinian citizens of Israel and Israeli Jews. Obviously, it will just be conjecture, but how do you think that has been developed over time in Israeli civil society? What is it that has kind of allowed these groups to come together and understand that working together as shared society is the only path forward?
I think many people in Israel, of course, the people who are active in those groups, understand that maybe the best test to the morality of a state, or to the moral of a state, is how the state is live with the minority in this state, with all the problems of national minority that are part of the nation who fight against Israel, part of the nation of these terrorists, these criminals who made what the same. But they are not the same people. They are in the same nation. There is a difference. And I think many people understand that. Many not, we have to say, in both parts, but many understand. I hate these questions, if you support Israel or you support Palestine, if you're pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. First, I think to be pro-Israel is to be pro-Israel, including the Palestinian minority. If you're not pro the Palestinian minority, you're not pro-Israel. Second, I don't know any contradiction between being pro-Israel to being pro-Palestine. I am pro-Israel and pro-Palestine. I'm pro-Palestine, and I think that the Hamas, now it's very clear. I think it was clear earlier, but now I think all of us should see that is not only an enemy of Israel, is an enemy of Palestine, as an enemy of the Palestinian people. And I'm saying that as a person who supports Israel and support Palestine. Yes, I think that the terrible atrocities that we saw, we have all to check ourselves. Maybe we made mistakes in the past. Maybe, for sure, we don't know what could have been if. And we don't know what will be if. But there are things that we do know. The moral things are not changing. There are here two nations. Both of them should live. Both of them have the right for self-determination. And those moral things will not be changed. And we must go on. And yes, the strength of Israel, one of the tests to the strength of Israel is how Jews and Palestinians, citizens of this state, can live together. And right now, in the last 6 days, they are doing that. I really appreciate the citizens of Israel, Jews and Palestinians, who do it in a very, very good way. And among the, I think, more than 3,000 injured people who were injured, yes, close to 100, more than 90% are Jews, but among the people who treat them, doctors, nurses, and others, many Palestinians.
So it's really interesting because as you're talking about it, there's two questions in the chat that are the different sides of the same coin. So I'm going to ask you both of them because it's exactly what we're talking about. So there's one person who is curious in the chat if this current predicament will give rise to a new progressive political party within Israel. And then there's another question that asks if there's a third way developing in Palestine, especially among the youth, that is beyond Hamas or Fatah and the PA. So basically, are we going to see do you think we're going to see some drastic political shift either in Israel or in Palestine as a result of this?
It is very hard to say. You know, David Grossman, the author, that I admire so much. He wrote an article today. By the way, it's not that far from what I have said, more or less the same. But for the future, he predicted that Israel in the coming years will be more racist, more right-wing, more hating minorities and Palestinians. It is really possible after what we saw. It is really possible. I'm not sure. I said I don't think that we can predict the future. Would I say in the sixth day of the Yom Kippur War that you know, in 5 years, a little bit more than 5 years, Israel and Egypt will sign peace treaty. I think people would think that I'm stupid. And yes, there are differences. Sadat is not a Nia. Yes, Egypt is not the Hamas, but the basis is the same. The nations who made the worst crimes in the history of the world got their right for self-determination and the state. Crimes that are way more than what we saw, the terrible crime that we saw on Saturday. I can talk about Germany, Japan, Italy, others. I don't think that, but about a new progressive party or movement in Israel, it's so early to say. Basically, I think that, and I think that since the last elections, that for the next elections, we have to run together. If I talk about my party, Meretz, with our party, I believe of most of us, with everybody who is willing to go with us. I'm talking about Labour, I'm talking the Arab members of Knesset, I'm talking about Yesh Atid and even Gantz, but I don't see it happens. What I do see is the new movement for Meretz and Labour. How many people in Israel are going to be progressive at the end of this war? It's hard to know. And some things, and sometimes things, it takes time until things happen. So it might be months or years, but in the end of the day, the moral values are not changing. About the question about Palestine, I don't know. I'm not sure that I understand enough the Palestinian society, the differences between people who live in Gaza, people who live in the West Bank, people who live in East Jerusalem that is part of the West Bank, but a real different part. I do know that Palestinians are afraid. We haven't heard any real condemning of Palestinians. Yeah, sometimes some of them would call me and say, I condemn that, they are criminals, we should kill them, yes. But they don't write it. Very few are writing like that. And many people here are really disappointed of that. The Palestinian Authority that should be our counterpart is, if we talk about President Abbas, you know, not that Biden and Netanyahu are young, but they are young comparing to him, and is very unpopular. Not many people support him, and we don't know what's going to happen if tomorrow he leaves or pass away. You know, he's not young anymore. So many questions about Palestine. It's very hard to guess.
I want to shift. There's a couple questions about specifically the military, and so I want to kind of try to combine some of them and shift to those questions. I think especially for folks in the diaspora, this idea of the IDF, first of all, the IDF is the most trusted institution in Israel. I think there's a lot of trust and good feeling and goodwill in the diaspora towards the IDF as well. Seeing what happened in those initial hours, folks not knowing where the army was or if the army was coming, how does that change that perception of that institution? And I want to add to that as well, even within the Israeli government and how the IDF is managed, someone is asking about that they've heard that the units that have been mobilized to the south don't have basic supplies, and they've had to resort to getting help from civil society groups. So can you confirm if that is actually the case? And then can you talk about what that trust in the institution of the IDF looks like?
First, yes, people lost trust in the IDF, and how couldn't they? I mean, tens of thousands of people are sitting and waiting for the IDF, and terrorists are killing them. Where was the IDF? Part of the answer was in the occupied territories, but it is not enough to say that. The problem is even worse than that. The IDF was not prepared. Now, about this, I must say about this units who sent to the south without the equipment, while the IDF now is recruiting 300,000 reservists, more than what we have in the army. So the army, in a minute, more than double itself. So even in the past, we knew that in the first day you have lack of equipment. I think it's really natural. The difference now is first that we have these social networks that in a minute everybody knows. I was recruited to the second war in Lebanon as reservist, and to the first and second Intifada as reservist, and there were problems, but we couldn't tell anything about that until we went home a few weeks later. So this is one point, and the second point is that the civil society today is very, very strong, thanks to these social networks, thanks to the protest, and to other organizations, some of them right-wing organizations. The civil society is very, very strong. And, even if I could, in the first Intifada, when I was recruited in 87 or 88, I don't have anything. Even if I could write, who could bring it to me? Today, people are very strong. They have the money, they have the funds to do that. And this is a positive point. So, but the trust in the IDF lost. That's for sure. I guess that in the end of the war, after the IDF will show its power, then will be more trust. But I'm afraid on the other hand that it's going to be after people in both sides are going to pay in their lives.
Yeah. You mentioned kind of these discussions around the IDF being disproportionately in the occupied West Bank, guarding settlements. And there is someone who is asking about that ongoing violence by settlers in the West Bank. I think in the past few days in revenge attacks, the last I saw, I think there were 3 Palestinians that were killed. There's obviously less of a focus on that now because all eyes are on Gaza and what is happening there. But there is obviously still a very more live than ever situation happening in the West Bank. Can you comment on what that looks like and what that looks like moving forward, given this changing reality on the ground?
Yes, yeah, I am afraid that there are settlers they always wanted to change the reality on the ground, and now is the most convenient time for them. It's not really interesting to talk about killing of free people when we talk about a massacre of more than 1,000 people. And it's not really interesting to talk about evacuation of few homes when 20 kibbutzim left their homes. This is the right moment for them. The media is busy. The peace activists are busy. I just got a message a minute ago. I just read it while talking to you that first time in 13 years, I think, the weekly demonstration in Sheikh Jarrah will not happen tomorrow because the residents of Sheikh Jarrah, the Palestinian residents, asked not to do that, and they are right. Because you want justice for Sheikh Jarrah, but what's the problem of Sheikh Jarrah that they throw out of their homes few families? Here we talk about. So everything now is so different and so easier to those settlers that I must say that I'm surprised that they are not doing more. I'm really surprised.
Yeah.
But they are going to do, and we will have to stop them.
Yeah. So on that note, I mean, I think that you're right. The might of Hamas is obviously much larger, as we've seen through the destruction that's happened. And so there is a question about destroying Hamas. I think there's an understanding that Hamas needs to be defeated, but are there actually military means to do so? And if not, what does that look like for the future of Hamas?
I don't, if there is a way to destroy the military power of Hamas, I support it. I fully agree with President Biden. I'm not sure that I remember the very same words, but he said that Israeli response should be stronger if it follows the law. It follows the law of the war. I think this is what he said, but maybe you can correct me. But basically, this is what I've heard. And to destroy the military power of Hamas is fully legitimate. And if we can do that, I'm not sure that we can. It's not going to be easy. Even if we can, it's going to be very costly. But if you can do that, we should do that, and it's going to be I think it's going to be better for both nations, the Palestinians and the Israelis. But to do that will not be easy. And there is one more thing that I think that we should remember. I think we started with that we have people who were kidnapped, and we have people who were captured. And for sure, one of the goals of this war should be to release immediately the people who were captured, to people who were kidnapped. People who were captured, I think, as I've said, okay, we should release and they should release. But kidnapping childs, elderly people is something that is not acceptable.
Yeah, so on that, actually, there is a question that is a little bit more about the policy of that. Given that situation, what should Israel be doing now? And also, what should the United States be doing from a policy perspective?
I'm not sure that I understand the question. What is policy perspective?
So what are the things that the governments, what should be top priority for the governments, both in Israel and in the United States? Is it the release of hostage? Is it calling for a ceasefire? What is the move that should be happening both by international governments and Israeli governments to move forward?
I think release of hostages, for my opinion, is the most immediate and important thing. This is first time that I would not call for ceasefire, which I called in the last 40 years every time that we have a war, because I accept the goal of destroying the military power of Hamas. Yeah, I call the Israeli government to follow the international law. That's yes, but I will not call now for ceasefire. No, this is not a goal. This is not what we should achieve now. But releasing the hostages is, I think, the first priority now. I'm not talking now about soldiers. It's very sad to say, but soldiers is not like citizens. And then trying to, at least if we cannot defeat the military power of Hamas, at least making it really different, way weaker. I think that we have to be very careful not to have a war with Hezbollah. I am afraid, because I hear people in Israel, I'm afraid that Netanyahu might think about that. I hope not. And of course, we are the occupier in the West Bank. It's not going to be changing during the war, but we have to follow the international law there too. So this is regarding policy, and I think President Biden, until now, people here say that we found the leader. It's not Netanyahu, it's Biden. I think that every Israeli admire everything he has said and done in this week.
Great, that's good to hear. I have another question about the diaspora, actually, which is, if the government, if the Israeli government thinks about the impact of these wars on anti-Semitism in the diaspora, is there an awareness? Is there any kind of realization of how the actions of Israel affect rising anti-Semitism in the US and abroad?
We must think about that all the time, but maybe I have to ask you, what is the meaning of the thinking? How should we act? I don't know. Maybe I really don't know, because I don't think that. I do understand. I completely understand that. Okay, right now Israel was the victim, but in the coming weeks we will see way more victims in the Palestinian side, and I hope way less in the Israeli side. And then people are going to, in the world, even in Israel, are going to talk different than how they talk today. They're going to say, okay, we saw atrocities, we saw very bad things, but you're doing the same. You kill. Maybe you don't rape. Maybe you don't, but you kill. So how can we at least make these people who are opposing the Israeli policy, or opposing the Israeli occupation, or even opposing Israel, not go to anti-Semitism? I think, I don't know, I think maybe we have to ask you, not in order to understand to ourselves.
Yeah. So, it's interesting, because I want to ask you the flip side of it as well. And I think that the answer a little bit might be hidden in the question, which I think is just holding our humanity for all of these different people, because there is a question, which I would be remiss not to also get to, which is, what about the well-being of the people of Gaza? We're seeing entire neighborhoods destroyed. We're seeing, families, houses completely destroyed. And there's many folks who are, in the same way that we talk about anti-Semitism in the US and conflating all Jews with the government of Israel, we also see this issue of people conflating all Palestinians with Hamas. What needs to happen next for their well-being? We need to follow international law, obviously, and rules of war. but what is the answer for 2.3 million people in Gaza who have nowhere to go and can't get out amidst its destruction?
I think this is very good question. I think international community and international organizations should. I don't see Egypt accepting them. Yes, if Egypt accept them, nice. I cannot ask them to do it. Every Israeli will be happy. I think most of the Palestinians will be happy. I'm not sure about the Egyptians, so I don't see that happens. What we should do, international community and international organizations should help them with food, with water, with medical security, maybe even another hospital, with supply of blankets or everything they need from this humanitarian point of view, because in the end of the day, Hamas terrorists, there are many people. Yeah, I think there are about 40 or 50,000 people, but still we have another 2 million that are not. Many of them kids. And we should make sure that our war is not against the Palestinian people. It's not against the residents of Gaza Strip. It's against the Hamas.
I'm curious about getting back to what moving forward looks like among Israeli society and also Israelis and Palestinians working together. A lot of organizations that partners support are dialogue groups, Parent Circle, Combatants for Peace, etc. I don't know if you'll know in depth the answer to this, but I know that you have been involved in some of those groups and organizations as well. How are they reacting in this moment? Are people able to come together and engage in dialogue with the other at a time when things are so tense?
When you say the other, you mean to the Palestinians or?
And vice versa. Yeah, Israelis to Palestinians, Palestinians to Israelis.
There are, of course, there are, some telephone messages and things like that, but there are no meetings. If even the weekly demonstration in Sheikh Jarrah is not happening, it says that Israelis and Palestinians are not meeting together. I'm not talking about citizens of Israel, but even among citizens, people meet less. By the way, you should know that I think most of the Israelis, at least in the center and the south, don't get much out of their homes. If they must go to, there are no schools, no university. If they must go to work, they do, but most of them don't, or work by remote from home. So people don't meet. Even people who were supposed to meet for meeting groups, for parties, for anything. Almost everything is cancelled. Yes, of course, weddings, and so people hardly meet each other, and of course, hardly meet the others from the other nation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Which I suppose in a time of such tense times is probably pretty understandable. So I do kind of want to ask though on that topic, historically we've seen following wars that it's prompted some sort of peace agreement, but it's hard to see that happening here for a variety of reasons. Israel is such a military might. If Hamas is obliterated, then who does govern Gaza? Who are we making that peace agreement with? So do you think that again, I know it's early days, it's so hard to predict any of these things, but looking back on the history of Israel and what's traditionally happened at the end of a really devastating war, do you think there's a possibility that that will happen here, or are people going to become even more extreme?
As I said earlier, it's hard to guess, and it is hard to know. I think basically after wars, people become more extreme, but maybe later it is different. The peace treaty that we had with Egypt was 5.5 years after the war. People agreed to peace that we could not imagine before. But in the first years after the war, people became more extreme, and we could see that in the settlement activity in the West Bank. But it's very hard to predict, I'm not sure. And yes, there is a real question that I hope the government of Israel taking into consideration. If you took over Gaza, or even if you just eliminate the Hamas, who is going to rule Gaza? I don't see Abbas coming on the guns of Israeli occupation. Maybe. Some would say that he's doing that in the West Bank. I don't think it's going to happen in Gaza. So who is going to rule Gaza? Egypt? I don't think that they want to do that. Israel? It's going to be terrible. Maybe necessary, I'm not sure. Maybe necessary for a while, but it's going to be terrible for both sides. So this is, I think, the main question that the government, the cabinet has to ask themselves before they decide, because to go in Gaza, it's difficult, but to go out, it's even more difficult.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's definitely a very tough situation to see our way out of. And so I do want to just ask you, I guess, a final question for those of us who are hearing all of this, of course, understanding that these are very difficult questions and hard to answer. We are far away, but we feel so connected to Israel. We feel so connected to the work that, especially folks like you are doing in anti-occupation space and towards peace and equality. But being so far away, being so disconnected, we obviously feel very helpless. But we want to do something. So for you, for all of your allies on the ground, what can we do in the diaspora to help?
I wish I know, but I think first to speak, to work together with Arabs and Palestinians in the diaspora, to support peace activists and peace organizations in Israel. Of course, I can recommend, but this is, I'm sure you know without me, to fight anti-Semitism is very important, because here they say, they are anti-Semitized. But so to fight, I think all of those are very, very important. Work with Palestinians to speak, fight anti-Semitism, and to support Israelis and Palestinians who work for peace.
Yeah. And that work is going to continue, of course. I'm obviously wearing my Hope Tikva Amal shirt, which feels, maybe difficult right now, but I hope that we can keep that alive. Mossi, we're nearing the end of our time, so I do want to thank you for taking the time. I know it's an incredibly tense time. Of course, I know it's a tense time, and I really appreciate you taking the time. And we send our support and our condolences for you and all those who are grieving losses right now. I do just want to also mention to what Mossi has just said in terms of keeping that shared society work going. It is obviously clear now more than ever that we must get back on that path to peace when we can, to an end of the occupation, to justice for Israelis and Palestinians. So I do want to encourage folks that are on this webinar, if you haven't yet registered for our Israel-Palestine Symposium, which begins in just over a week on October 22nd, some of these organizations that we've been talking talking about dialogue groups, peace groups. They're going to be joining us and speaking about not only the situation on the ground now, but how we move forward. Following this webinar, we'll send out a recording. We'll have a link to that symposium page, and I do encourage you to look through those sessions, look through the content, and join us, because I think it is more important now than ever. It is going to be a series of crucial and timely conversations. So I do want to say once again, thank you so much to Mossi. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. Thank you for your support of Partners for Progressive Israel, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Mossi.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Metal. Bye.
Bye.